The stars had watched Earth for a very long time. They had seen the dinosaurs come and go. They had seen the first humans stand on two legs. They had seen empires rise and fall like waves on a beach. But the stars were not alone in their watching. Far beyond the edge of the solar system, a massive fleet of ships hung in the darkness of space. These ships belonged to the Galactic Council, a collection of over 2,000 alien species who had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. They had conquered worlds, destroyed civilizations, and brought order to chaos. They believed they knew everything about the universe. They were wrong. Ambassador stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. His people, had been members of the Council for over 50,000 years, had personally overseen the classification of 300 worlds. He had seen primitive species beg for mercy. He had watched advanced civilizations crumble under the Council's power. Earth, he believed, would be no different. "Status report," said, his voice deep and cold. His second officer, a smaller creature with scales and many eyes, pulled up data on the main screen. The planet is called Earth by its inhabitants. Population approximately 8 billion. Technology level is basic. They have achieved space travel but only within their own system. They have nuclear weapons but limited defensive capabilities. Made a sound that was almost like a laugh. Another primitive world. How long until we reach optimal scanning distance? 3 hours, Ambassador. Nodded and turned to look at the blue and green planet growing larger in the... It was beautiful, he had to admit. Most worlds were. Beauty meant nothing to the Council. Only power mattered. Only control. On Earth, in a small research station in South Korea, a young scientist named Ho was having the worst night of his life. His coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago. His back hurt from sitting in the same chair for 12 hours. And the data on his screen made absolutely no sense. Ho worked for the Korean Space Research Institute. His job was to monitor deep space signals, looking for anything unusual. Most nights, he found nothing. Space was big and empty and boring. But tonight, his equipment was going crazy. "This cannot be right," Ho muttered to himself. He ran the numbers again, then again. The result was the same each time. There were ships approaching Earth, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They were still far away, but they were moving fast, too fast for any human technology. Ho reached for his phone with shaking hands. He called his supervisor, Dr. Park. The phone rang 5 times before a sleepy voice answered. "This better be important," Dr. Park said. "Sir, you need to come to the station right now. We have contact, real contact." There was a long pause. "Are you joking?" "I wish I was, sir. Please hurry." Within 2 hours, the small research station was filled with government officials, military officers, and scientists from around the world. Ho's discovery had spread like fire. Every major nation had confirmed the readings. The ships were real. They were coming. The president of South Korea arrived at dawn. She was a small woman named, with gray hair and kind eyes. She had led her country through economic crises and natural disasters, but nothing had prepared her for this. "How long do we have?" President asked. Ho looked at his data. "The ships have slowed down. They appear to be holding position just outside our solar system. We estimate they could reach Earth in less than a day if they wanted to." "What do they want?" "We do not know, Madam President. They have not attempted communication." President looked at the screen showing the fleet of alien ships. Her heart was beating fast, but her face remained calm. She had learned long ago that leaders could not show fear, even when fear was all they felt. "Then we will communicate first," she said. The military officers in the room shifted nervously. General, a large man with a face, stepped forward. "Madam President, with respect, we should prepare our defenses. We should." "Our defenses," President interrupted. "General, look at that fleet. Really look at it. They have crossed distances we cannot imagine using technology we cannot understand. If they wanted to destroy us, what could we possibly do to stop them? General had no answer. President turned to Ho. Can you send them a message, something they might understand? Ho thought for a moment. We could send a mathematical sequence. Mathematics is universal. If they are intelligent, they will recognize it. Do it. Ho worked quickly. He programmed a simple sequence, prime numbers, the value of pi, basic geometric shapes. Then he added something extra, a recording of human voices saying one word in 100 different languages. Welcome. The message was sent into space at the speed of light. On the Eternal Dominion, Ambassador was reviewing the Council's standard procedures for first contact when an alarm sounded. Ambassador, we are receiving a transmission from the planet. Four arms crossed in confusion. That is not possible. Primitive species do not initiate contact. They hide, they panic, they prepare for war. Nevertheless, Ambassador, the transmission is real. The message played on the bridge, numbers, shapes, and then voices. Thousands of different voices speaking in hundreds of different languages, all saying the same thing. Listened in silence. In his 50,000 years, he had never experienced anything like this. The creatures of Earth knew they were outmatched. They had to know. And yet their first message was not a threat, not a plea, not a surrender. It was a welcome. What kind of species is this? Whispered. His second officer checked the database. According to our records, humans have existed for approximately 300,000 years. They have spent most of that time fighting each other. Wars, genocide, environmental destruction. By all measures, they should have destroyed themselves long ago. And yet they have not. No, Ambassador, they have not. Stared at the blue planet on his screen. Something about this world was different. He could feel it in his bones. The Council had conquered 2,000 species. They had crushed civilizations that had lasted millions of years. But Earth made him uneasy. Send a response, ordered. Tell them we come in peace. Tell them the Galactic Council wishes to meet with their leaders. It was a lie, of course. The Council did not come in peace. They came to conquer, to control, to add another world to their empire, but was curious. He wanted to understand these strange creatures who welcomed death with open arms. On Earth, the world had changed forever. News of the alien fleet had spread across every television, every phone, every computer. People reacted in different ways. Some panicked. Some prayed. Some looted stores and fought in the streets. But most people did something unexpected. They helped each other. In Seoul, Ho watched the news in amazement. People were sharing food with strangers. Neighbors who had not spoken in years were embracing. Enemies were setting aside their differences. It was as if the entire human race had suddenly remembered that they were all one family. Why are they doing that? Asked Dr. Park, who stood beside him. Ho smiled sadly. Because they are scared. And when humans are truly scared, we do not turn against each other. We turn toward each other. President received the alien response within an hour. They wanted to meet. She immediately called an emergency meeting of the United Nations. Within days, she was on a plane to New York, where leaders from every nation gathered to decide humanity's fate. The debates lasted for weeks. Some wanted to fight, some wanted to surrender, some wanted to hide. But President had a different idea. We should show them who we are, she said to the assembly. Not our weapons, not our technology, us, our art, our music, our stories, our love, our pain, everything that makes us human. The room fell silent. They expect us to be afraid, she continued. They expect us to fight or flee. Let us surprise them. Let us show them something they have never seen before. Let us show them our hearts. It was a bold plan, a crazy plan. But in a universe full of conquerors, perhaps crazy was exactly what humanity needed to be. The vote was unanimous. Earth would face the aliens not with weapons but with wonder, not with fear but with friendship. It was the most human decision they could have made. And somewhere in the darkness of space, Ambassador watched and wondered if the Council had finally found something it could not conquer. The Galactic Council's assessment team arrived on Earth 30 days after first contact. They came in a single ship, smaller than the massive warships that still waited in the darkness beyond the moon. Ambassador had chosen his team carefully. They were scientists, observers, experts in understanding primitive species. Their job was simple: study the humans, find their weaknesses, and prepare them for conquest. Nothing about their mission would be simple. The ship landed in Geneva, Switzerland, on the grounds of the United Nations. Thousands of people had gathered to watch, held back by police lines and military barriers, expected screaming, panic, maybe even violence. Instead, he heard something strange. Music. A children's choir was singing near the landing zone. Their voices were soft and pure, rising into the cold morning air. Did not understand the words, but the sound made something twist inside his chest. It was an unfamiliar feeling, uncomfortable. "What are they doing?" asked his chief scientist. Was a thin creature with large black eyes and delicate fingers designed for precise work. "I believe they are welcoming us," said slowly. "With sound that is inefficient." Did not respond. He was watching the children's faces. They were not afraid, some were even smiling. President of South Korea was part of the welcoming committee. She stood with other world leaders at the base of the ship's ramp, waiting with quiet dignity. When descended, she stepped forward and bowed. "Welcome to Earth," she said. "We are honored by your visit." Looked down at this tiny creature with her gray hair and calm eyes. She barely reached his chest. He could crush her with one of his 4 arms, and yet she stood before him without trembling. "You do not fear us," said. It was not a question. President smiled. "I am terrified, Ambassador, but fear does not mean I cannot be polite." Over the following weeks, his team spread across the globe. They visited cities and villages, mountains and oceans. They observed humans at work and play, in peace and conflict, and with each passing day, their confusion grew. Submitted daily reports too. Each one was more troubled than the last. "The humans make no sense," complained during one evening meeting. "They have weapons capable of destroying their entire planet, yet they have not used them in nearly a century. They fight wars over resources they could easily share. They destroy their environment while simultaneously trying to save it. Their logic is completely broken." Listened patiently. "What else have you found?" "They have something called charity. Some humans give away food, money, and time to complete strangers. They gain nothing from this. It serves no survival purpose. It is completely irrational. Perhaps they are simply weak." Shook his head, a gesture he had learned from the humans. "No, Ambassador. I observed a human female lift a vehicle to free a child trapped underneath. Physically, this should have been impossible. Her body should have broken, but she did it anyway because the child needed help." Sat in silence for a long moment. In all his years, he had never encountered a species like this. The humans were contradictions wrapped in contradictions. They were violent and peaceful, selfish and generous, logical and completely insane. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a young Korean woman named was having her own encounters with the alien visitors. Worked as a translator for the United Nations. She spoke 7 languages fluently and had a gift for understanding what people meant, even when their words said something different. She had been assigned to work with a young alien analyst named Riven. Riven was different from the other aliens. She was smaller, younger, with pale blue skin and eyes that sparkled like stars. She asked many questions, not about military bases or weapons, but about human feelings. "Why do humans cry?" Riven asked one afternoon. They were sitting in a park in Seoul, watching children play on swings. Thought about the question. We cry when our hearts are too full, when we feel so much that our bodies cannot hold it all inside. Full of what? Sadness, joy, love, fear, many things. Riven's eyes widened. You cry from joy, that seems inefficient. Laughed, maybe, but it feels good sometimes to let everything out. Riven was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that surprised. My people do not cry. We do not feel things the way you do. When I was young, my mother was taken away. She had broken a law. I never saw her again. I was told not to think about her. I was told feelings were weakness. Felt her heart ache for this strange blue girl who had never been allowed to grieve. Without thinking, she reached out and took Riven's hand. I am sorry, said softly. That must have been very hard. Riven stared at their joined hands. Why are you touching me? We are not family. You gain nothing from this. You look sad. When humans are sad, we hold each other. It helps. Helps what? It helps us feel less alone. Something changed in Riven's eyes. For just a moment, her professional mask slipped and saw the lost child underneath. Then Riven pulled her hand away and stood up. I must return to my duties, she said quickly, but before she left, she paused. Thank you for explaining. As the assessment continued, began receiving pressure from the Galactic Council. The high leaders were impatient. They wanted a classification for Earth. They wanted to know if humans were a threat or a resource. Studied all the data his team had collected. He read reports about human wars and human kindness. He watched videos of humans destroying and creating. He listened to their music and read their poetry. And he came to a conclusion that troubled him deeply. Humans were not like any species the Council had ever encountered. They were not simply violent or peaceful, intelligent or primitive. They were everything all at once. They contained multitudes. What is your recommendation, Ambassador? The High Leader asked during a holographic meeting. Hesitated. In 50,000 years he had never hesitated before. I recommend we classify Earth as an unpredictable threat level. The humans are too chaotic. Their behavior cannot be predicted. They may be primitive, but they are not controllable. Are you saying they could be dangerous? I am saying we do not understand them. And what we do not understand, we cannot conquer. The High Leader was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. Then we must test them. We must see what they do when faced with true disaster. Only then will we know what they truly are. Felt a chill run down his spine. He knew what a council test meant. Devastation, destruction, death. They would create a catastrophe and watch how the humans responded. It was cruel, but it was effective. Most species revealed their true nature in times of crisis. As you command, said. After the meeting ended, sat alone in his quarters. He thought about President and her polite terror. He thought about the children singing at the landing zone. He thought about all the strange, beautiful, terrible things he had witnessed on Earth. For the first time in his long life, felt something he could not name. It was similar to doubt, similar to guilt, similar to fear. He pushed the feeling aside and began planning the test. Back in Seoul, met with Riven one last time. The alien girl seemed different, nervous, distracted. Is something wrong? Asked. Riven looked at her with those starry eyes. I am being reassigned. I must return to the fleet. Oh, felt a surprising sadness. Will I see you again? I do not know. Riven hesitated, then spoke quickly and quietly. Be careful, something is coming. I cannot tell you what, but please, be ready. Before could ask what she meant, Riven turned and walked away. She did not look back. That night lay awake in her bed, thinking about Riven's warning. Something was coming. She did not know what. But somehow, deep in her human heart, she knew that the real test was about to begin. And she knew that everything would depend on whether humanity could remain human in the face of whatever came next. Far above the Earth, Ambassador gave the order. The test would begin at dawn. He told himself it was necessary. He told himself the council's way was the only way. But as he watched the blue planet turning slowly below him, he could not shake the feeling that he was about to make a terrible mistake. The earthquake struck without warning at exactly 6:47 in the morning. It was not a natural earthquake. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, hidden alien devices had been activated, sending shock waves through the Earth's crust. The Council had used this technique on dozens of worlds. It was simple, effective, and devastating. Tokyo was hit first. Buildings that had survived countless real earthquakes now crumbled like sandcastles. The ground split open, swallowing cars and buses and people. Fires erupted across the city. Power lines fell, sparking explosions that turned blocks into infernos. Then came the tsunami. A wall of water 60 feet high raced toward the coast of Japan. Warning systems screamed. People ran. But for many, there was nowhere to go and no time to get there. Ambassador watched from his ship, high above the destruction. Beside him recorded everything on sensitive instruments that captured every detail, every death, every scream, every moment of chaos. "How are they responding?" asked. Studied the data. As expected initially, panic, fear, self-preservation instincts are dominant. Many are fleeing without regard for others. Nodded. This was normal. This was how all species responded. In times of true crisis, every creature looked out for itself. The strong survived. The weak perished. It was the universal law. But then something unexpected happened. A man in Tokyo stopped running. He was young, maybe 30, with dust covering his face and blood running down his arm. His name was, though would never know this, had been visiting Japan for business when the earthquake struck. He had no family here, no friends. Every instinct told him to keep running toward safety. Instead, he turned back. He had heard a child crying in the rubble of a collapsed building. Without thinking, began digging through broken concrete and twisted metal. His hands were torn and bleeding within minutes. He did not stop. "What is that human doing?" asked, zooming in on the scene. "I do not know," said. Other people saw digging and stopped running too. One by one, they joined him. A businessman in a torn suit, a grandmother with a crooked back, a group of teenagers who had been fleeing toward the hills. They formed a chain, passing chunks of concrete from hand to hand. 20 minutes later, they pulled a little girl from the ruins. She was crying but alive. Held her while the grandmother checked her for injuries. The businessman called for emergency services on a phone that somehow still worked. Then they heard another cry, and they began digging again. This scene repeated itself across Japan, across the world. The earthquake had triggered secondary disasters on 4 continents, volcanic eruptions in Indonesia, landslides in South America, floods in Southeast Asia. Everywhere, destruction rained down on human civilization. And everywhere, humans responded the same way. They helped each other. In Seoul woke to the sound of sirens and screaming. The earthquake had been felt even here, hundreds of miles from the epicenter. Power was out across the city. People poured into the streets, confused and frightened. Grabbed her phone and saw the news. The scope of the disaster was almost too big to comprehend. Millions of people affected, thousands dead, entire cities in ruins. Her first thought was to find her family to make sure they were safe. But when she stepped outside her apartment, she saw an elderly neighbor struggling down the stairs. The man was blind. He lived alone on the floor above her. His name was Mr. "Mr. Take my arm," said, grabbing his hand. "Is that you? What is happening?" "There was an earthquake. We need to get to safety. Come with me." She led him down 5 flights of stairs in total darkness, feeling each step carefully, moving slowly so he would not fall. Other residents passed them, rushing past without stopping. Did not blame them. Everyone was scared. When they finally reached the street, saw chaos everywhere. Cars were crashed into each other. A water main had burst, flooding the intersection. People were shouting, crying, running in every direction. "What do we do now?" Mr. asked, his voice trembling. Looked around. She spotted a small park nearby where people were gathering. "This way, stay close to me." At the park, found a group of neighbors organizing relief efforts. A young man named Jun had taken charge. He was a medical student, barely 22, but he spoke with calm authority. "We need to find anyone who is injured," Jun said. "We need to share whatever food and water we have. The electricity is out, so we need to check on everyone with medical equipment at home. This is going to be a long night. We need to work together." No one argued. No one fought about who should be in charge. In the face of disaster, the usual divisions of age and status and social class melted away. They were all just people now, just humans trying to survive. Far above the Earth, Ambassador was deeply troubled. The data made no sense. In every disaster the Council had ever engineered, species behaved predictably. Fear drove them apart. Survival instincts turned them against each other. The strong trampled the weak. This was universal. This was nature. But the humans were not following the pattern. "Look at this," said, pointing to a screen showing footage from Indonesia. A village had been destroyed by volcanic mudflows. Survivors from a neighboring village, which had been spared, were now sharing their food and shelter with the refugees. "They are giving away their resources," said. "They will not have enough for themselves. This makes no logical sense." Another screen showed footage from Chile. A landslide had trapped dozens of miners underground. Rescue teams from 3 different countries had already arrived to help. People who had been strangers 12 hours ago were now working side by side, digging through rock to save people they had never met. "Why," whispered, "why do they do this?" On the ground in Japan, a young firefighter named Jin was working on his 36th hour without sleep. His unit had been deployed to one of the hardest-hit areas near the coast. Bodies were everywhere. The smell of smoke and salt and death filled the air. Jin was searching through the remains of an office building when his equipment detected a life sign. Someone was trapped beneath several floors of collapsed concrete, alive but fatting. The rescue would be difficult, maybe impossible. Jin's commander told him to move on, to focus on areas where they could save more people with less effort. It made sense from a practical standpoint. Jin refused. "There is someone alive in there," he said. "I am not leaving." He began digging by hand. Other firefighters joined him, ignoring their commander's protests. They worked for 6 hours, clearing debris inch by inch, shoring up unstable structures, refusing to give up. Finally, they broke through to a small pocket of air. Inside, they found a survivor, but it was not a human. It was Riven. The young alien had been in the building when the earthquake struck, gathering data for the Council's observation. The collapse had trapped her. Her leg was broken. Her communication device was destroyed. She had been alone in the dark for nearly 2 days, certain she would die. Jin stared at her for a long moment. He knew what she was. He knew that her people had probably caused this disaster. He had every reason to leave her there. Instead, he reached out his hand. "Can you move?" he asked. His Japanese was rough, but he hoped she understood. Riven looked at his hand as if it were a miracle. "Why would you help me?" "Because you are hurt, because you are alive, because that is what we do." He lifted her carefully from the rubble. She weighed almost nothing. Her blue skin was covered in dust and blood. She was trembling. "I do not understand," Riven whispered as Jin carried her to safety. "We did this to you. We caused this destruction. Why would you save me?" Jin was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that Riven would remember for the rest of her long life. "What you do does not change who I am." On the Council flagship, Ambassador received a report about the rescued alien analyst. He watched the footage of the human firefighter carrying Riven from the rubble. He listened to their conversation, translated by the ship's computers. What you do does not change who I am. Had lived for 50,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched civilizations burn and others be born from the ashes. He had believed he understood the universe and everything in it. But he had never seen anything like this. The humans knew, they had to know, they were not stupid. They could see the pattern of the disasters, the impossible timing, the unnatural precision. They knew the council was testing them. They knew aliens were watching. And they chose to be good anyway. Not because it would save them, not because it would impress their observers, but because it was simply who they were. Closed his eyes. For the first time in 50,000 years, he felt something crack inside his chest, something that had been frozen for longer than human civilization had existed. He was not sure what to call it, but it felt a lot like shame. Ambassador asked, "What do we report to the council?" Opened his eyes. He looked at the blue planet below, at all its fire and flood and chaos, at all its humans helping each other through the darkness. "Tell them the test is complete," said slowly. "Tell them the humans passed." "Passed? Ambassador, they are still dying down there. Their civilization is in chaos. And yet they remain human, they remain good, they refuse to break." Paused. "In 10,000 tests, no species has ever done that before." Was silent, there was nothing to say. Below them, the earth continued to turn. The fires continued to burn. And the humans continued to help each other, one act of kindness at a time, as they had always done, as they would always do. Because that was who they were. And nothing in the universe could change that. 2 weeks after the disaster, the earth was still healing. Cities lay in ruins. Millions were homeless. The death toll had stopped climbing, but the number was too large to truly comprehend. The world was broken in ways that would take years to repair. But humanity was not broken. In Geneva, the United Nations had called an emergency meeting. World leaders from every nation sat together in a room that still smelled of smoke from distant fires. President of South Korea stood at the podium, looking older than she had just weeks ago. The weight of everything showed on her face. "They tested us," she said quietly. "We all know this now. The earthquakes, the tsunamis, the volcanic eruptions. None of it was natural. The aliens wanted to see what we would do when pushed to the edge." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Anger, fear, betrayal. "We could respond with weapons," President continued. "We could try to fight, but we all know how that would end. Their technology is beyond anything we can imagine. We cannot win a war against them." "Then what do you suggest?" called a voice from the crowd. "Surrender." President shook her head. "No, I suggest we do something they will never expect. I suggest we show them who we truly are, not our weapons, not our anger, our hearts." The room fell silent. "Let us send them a message," she said. "Not a message of war or peace, a message of humanity, everything we are, everything we have ever been. Let them see us, truly see us, and let them decide what to do with that knowledge." The plan was called Project Echo. Within days, scientists and artists from around the world began working together. They would create the largest transmission in human history. It would be broadcast on every frequency the aliens could receive, sent out into space for all the galaxy to hear. And it would contain the soul of humanity. In Seoul, Ho worked around the clock. The young scientist who had first detected the alien ships was now leading the technical team for Project Echo. His job was to make sure the transmission reached every corner of the galaxy. "The signal will take years to reach distant systems," he explained to his team, "but the alien fleet will receive it instantly, and they will share it with the rest of the galaxy. I am sure of it." "How can you be sure?" asked one of his assistants. Ho smiled tiredly. "Because they are curious. They came here to understand us. We are going to give them everything they want to know." Across the world, people contributed to the transmission. Musicians sent their favorite songs. Artists sent images of their most beloved paintings. Writers sent stories and poems. Parents sent recordings of their children laughing. Elderly people sent memories of their grandparents. Every emotion, every experience, every moment of beauty and pain that made humans human. Worked as a translator for the project, helping to organize contributions from dozens of countries. She spent her days surrounded by the most beautiful and heartbreaking pieces of human expression. One evening, she received a video file from an anonymous sender. It showed a young Japanese firefighter carrying someone from rubble. The recording had no sound, but the image was clear. It was Jin, the man who had saved Riven. Added it to the transmission. She also added something personal, a short recording of herself speaking in Korean. My name is, I am 29 years old. I have never been brave or special. I work, I eat, I sleep. I worry about small things. But when I saw my neighbor alone and scared, I helped him. When I met a stranger from another world, I held her hand. I do not know why I do these things. Maybe it is weakness. Maybe it is love. Maybe there is no difference. She paused, fighting back tears. If you are listening, know this: we are not perfect. We hurt each other sometimes. We make terrible mistakes. But we also hold each other in the dark. We sing songs to bobbies who cannot understand the words. We build things just because they are beautiful. We love people we will never meet. We feel everything, even when it hurts. The recording ended, wiped her eyes, and moved on to the next file. After 1 month of work, Project Echo was complete. The transmission was massive, containing thousands of hours of music, millions of images, billions of words. The story of humanity, compressed into electromagnetic waves that would travel forever through the cold darkness of space. President gave the order to begin. The signal erupted from Earth like a sunrise. It traveled at the speed of light, racing past the moon, past the alien fleet, out into the endless black. And as it went, it carried the voice of humanity with it. Music, symphonies, and pop songs, ancient chants and modern beats, the sound of drums and violins and human voices raised in harmony. Images, paintings from caves 30,000 years old, photographs of lovers holding hands, pictures of mountains and oceans and cities and faces. Stories, myths about heroes who died for strangers, tales of love that crossed oceans and centuries, poems about the beauty of ordinary days. And woven through it all, the thread of human emotion, joy and sorrow, hope and despair, love and loss. Everything humans felt, everything they had ever felt, broadcast into the infinite void. On the Council flagship, Ambassador received the transmission. He watched and listened for 3 days without sleeping. He did not speak to anyone. He did not eat or drink. He simply experienced. He heard a funeral song from Korea, sung by a daughter at her mother's grave. He saw a painting by a man who had been blind from birth, showing colors he had never seen. He read a letter from a soldier writing home to his children, knowing he would never return. He watched a video of strangers forming a human chain to rescue a dog from a frozen river. Small things, ordinary things, things that meant nothing to the universe. Things that meant everything to the people who lived them. By the end was weeping. He did not know he could weep. He had not done so in 40,000 years. The tears felt strange on his gray cheeks. Ambassador entered his quarters cautiously. The High Council requests your report. Did not respond immediately. He was watching a video of children playing in rain, splashing in puddles and laughing as if the world was made of magic. Ambassador. They weaponized it, whispered. What? Emotion, feeling, they weaponized it, not as a weapon of war, as a weapon of connection. They are showing us who they are, and they are asking us to remember who we are, or who we might have been. Did not understand. What do we report to the council? Finally turned to face his officer. His eyes were red. His 4 hands were shaking. Tell them the transmission is spreading. Tell them every ship in the fleet has received it. Tell them there is nothing we can do to stop it." "Stop it? Why would we want to stop it?" Looked back at the screen. The children were still playing, still laughing, still alive in a moment that had already passed. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Once you hear them, you cannot them. Once you understand what they feel, you start to feel it too. The transmission continued spreading. Within days, it reached other council ships in the solar system. Within weeks, it was being relayed to distant outposts. Within months, it was echoing across the galaxy, carried by curious traders and scientists who passed it from system to system. And wherever it went, silence followed. Species who had never thought about their own feelings began to wonder. Civilizations who had suppressed emotion for millions of years began to remember. Ancient cultures who had forgotten how to cry began to weep. The Galactic Council had ruled through fear and control for eons beyond counting. They had conquered 2,000 worlds by making them forget who they were. But humanity had remembered, and now they were making everyone else remember too. On Earth, people went back to their ordinary lives. They rebuilt their cities. They buried their dead. They planted gardens and played music and held their children close. They did not know if their transmission had changed anything. They did not know if anyone was listening. But they hoped. And sometimes, late at night, when the stars were bright and the world was quiet, some of them would look up at the sky and feel something strange, a kind of connection, a sense that somewhere out there in the infinite darkness, someone was thinking about them. Someone was feeling what they felt. Someone was finally understanding. Stood on her balcony one such night looking at the stars. Somewhere out there, Riven was listening. Somewhere out there, the strange blue girl who had never been allowed to grieve was finally learning how. "I hope you find peace," whispered into the night. "I hope you find someone to hold your hand." The stars did not answer, but somehow felt that her message had been received. And across the galaxy, the silence deepened, not the silence of emptiness, the silence of listening, the silence of minds opening and hearts awakening, the silence that comes before everything changes. Humanity had not fired a single weapon. They had not conquered a single world. They had simply shared who they were, and the galaxy had fallen quiet to hear them. It was the most human victory of all. The Galactic Council met on there for the first time in 3,000 years. The great chamber was vast, carved from a single piece of black crystal that was older than most civilizations. Representatives from 2,000 species filled the endless rows of seats, their voices creating a storm of sound that echoed off the ancient walls. At the center of the chamber stood the High Leader, a being so old that no one remembered what species he had once been. He had ruled the council for 400,000 years. He had seen empires turn to dust. He had watched stars die. He had never lost. Until now. "Order," the High Leader commanded. His voice was soft, but it carried through the entire chamber. Silence fell instantly. "We are here to decide the fate of Earth. Ambassador, present your report." Rose from his seat. He looked different than he had before his mission. His gray skin seemed lighter. His 4 arms moved more gently. Something in his eyes had changed. High Leader began, "I was sent to Earth to assess humanity for conquest. I observed their civilization. I tested their response to crisis. And I witnessed something I cannot explain." "Get to your recommendation, Ambassador." Paused. He knew what he was about to say could end his career, perhaps his life. But he thought about Jin carrying Riven from the rubble. He thought about children singing at his arrival. He thought about's recording, her voice thick with tears as she spoke of holding hands with strangers. "I recommend we leave Earth alone," said. The chamber erupted in noise, shock, anger, disbelief. The council had never left a world alone, never in 2 million years. The High Leader raised one withered hand. Silence returned. "Explain yourself, Ambassador." "Humans are not like us," said. They are not like any species we have encountered. They feel things we have forgotten how to feel. They do things that make no logical sense, things that serve no purpose except to help each other. They are broken and beautiful and completely unpredictable. These are not reasons to spare them. These are reasons to destroy them. No, High Leader, these are reasons to fear them. A murmur ran through the chamber. Fear was not a word often spoken in the council. Continued. We rule through control. We conquer worlds by making them forget who they are. But the humans cannot forget. They carry their identity in their hearts, in their blood, in every song they sing and story they tell. You cannot conquer a people who know exactly who they are. Then we destroy them entirely. You could try, but their transmission has already spread across the galaxy. They have shared themselves with everyone. Every species under council rule has heard their music. Every civilization has seen their art. They have planted seeds of feeling in beings who had forgotten what feeling was. Looked around the chamber at the thousands of alien faces watching him. If you destroy Earth now, you will make them immortal. You will turn them into symbols. Every species that heard their transmission will remember them forever. They will become gods in the minds of the conquered, and you will never stop their influence. The High Leader was silent for a long moment. His ancient eyes studied with an intensity that made the ambassador's blood run cold. So you suggest we do nothing? I suggest we learn from them. The chamber exploded again. This time, the noise was louder, angrier. Delegates stood from their seats, shouting in 100 different languages. Some demanded execution. Others called for immediate attack on Earth. The chaos built and built until it seemed the chamber itself might crack from the pressure. Then something unexpected happened. A single voice cut through the noise. It belonged to a small creature with pale blue skin and eyes like stars. Riven. I request permission to speak, she said. The High Leader looked at her with cold curiosity. She was nothing, a junior analyst, barely old enough to attend council meetings. But there was something in her voice that made even the oldest delegates fall silent. Speak, the High Leader said. Riven walked to the center of the chamber. Her broken leg had healed, but she still moved with a slight limp. She faced the High Leader without fear. I was trapped in the ruins of their disaster, she said. I was dying. A human found me. He knew what I was. He knew my people had caused the destruction. He pulled me from the rubble anyway. She paused, gathering her courage. I asked him why, he said. What you do does not change who I am. The words echoed through the great chamber. 2,000 species heard them. 2,000 civilizations felt something stir in their ancient hearts. I have served the council all my life, Riven continued. I have done what I was told. I have believed what I was taught. But in that moment in the dark beneath the rubble, I learned something new. I learned that there are other ways to live, ways that are kinder, ways that are better. She turned to face the assembled delegates. I am not alone. I know many of you have felt it too. You have heard the human transmission. You have listened to their music and looked at their art and wondered what it would be like to feel what they feel, to care about strangers, to hold hands in the dark. Riven's voice grew stronger. The humans did not attack us. They shared themselves with us. They gave us a gift. And now we must decide what kind of people we want to be. Will we be conquerors who destroy beauty wherever we find it, or will we be something more, something better, something human? Silence filled the chamber. The High Leader looked at Riven with something that might have been hatred, or might have been fear. You forget your place, he said coldly. No, Riven replied. For the first time I have found it. She walked back to her seat. The chamber remained silent. Then slowly another delegate stood. I support the human cause, she said. She was from a species that had been conquered 50,000 years ago. My people remember what it was to feel. The humans have reminded us. Another delegate stood, then another, then dozens. Then hundreds, across the great chamber, beings from every corner of the galaxy rose to their feet. "This is treason," the High Leader hissed. "No," said, rising to join the others. "This is evolution." The vote was held at dawn the next day. For the first time in 2 million years, the Council voted against destruction. Earth would be left alone. Humanity would be allowed to live. But more than that, something had changed in the galaxy itself. The rigid structures of Council rule began to crack. Species that had been silent started speaking again. Civilizations that had forgotten their own songs began to sing. The humans had not conquered the galaxy. They had simply reminded it what it meant to be alive. On Earth, life continued as it always had. People worked and loved and fought and dreamed. Most of them had no idea what had happened in the great chamber far across the stars. They did not know that their music had changed ancient minds. They did not know that their art had awakened sleeping hearts. But some of them sensed it. Sol stood on her balcony as she did every night, looking at the stars. She had received a message earlier that day, transmitted through channels she did not understand. It contained only 2 words. "Thank you." She did not know who had sent it, but she smiled anyway. On the Council, Riven stood on a similar balcony, looking at a similar sky. She was thinking about a human who had carried her from darkness into light. She was thinking about a hand that had held hers when she needed it most. For the first time in her life, she was not alone. And across the galaxy, slowly, quietly, other beings were discovering the same truth. That feeling was not weakness. That kindness was not defeat. That the small, strange, chaotic humans had taught them something they had forgotten long ago. How to live. Ambassador retired from the Council shortly after the vote. He spent his remaining years traveling the galaxy, listening to human music and looking at human art. When asked why, he would simply say that he was learning. Learning what it meant to be human. Learning what it meant to feel. The stars continued to shine. The galaxy continued to turn. And somewhere, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow sun, humans continued to be exactly what they were. Messy, complicated, beautiful. Alive. And that, in the end, was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.